priorities of U.S. voters in this campaign and what the candidates may or may not want to do. We're joined by Rafael Bernal. He's a staff writer at The Hill. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you here again in Washington. We are awaiting the first results from the polls right now. The expectations are that Trump is still going to win, although in the last few weeks, a number of media outlets have talked about this gap between Trump and Nikki Haley closing to single digits. And keep in mind, this is on the backdrop of a number of candidates dropping out.
Yeah, you have to remember this is New Hampshire we're talking about, and New Hampshire has a tendency to, I always say New Hampshire zigs when everybody else is zagging. Part of that is the voter composition, as your report was saying. Independents can choose which primary to vote in. There's a myth that Democrats can choose to vote in the Republican primary. That's not true. Registration closed last October, and that's when voters had to choose their party. But there is always, New Hampshire always has a more independent streak. It's a more libertarian as opposed to conservative state. There's reasons why Nikki Haley chose to invest nearly $30 million there. But the fact remains, she will probably lose tonight, most likely. And she's even likely to lose in her home state, where Senator Tim Scott, who was also in the race earlier last year, in the presidential race, he's endorsed former President Trump. So that makes Nikki Haley's job even harder in her own home state. And that's really expected to be a final blow.
Is that an understatement? Does she have a path to victory? I mean, we saw former Trump obviously winning in Iowa, and I believe I read some stat that was the first time since 1976, since sort of the modern era of primaries, where the candidate wins both the first two primaries. And if you give South Carolina, I don't know where we go from here. I should say, I don't know where she goes from here.
I think it's in the realm of reality that Nikki Haley could eventually be the Republican nominee, but the probability is just infinitely low that that's what's going to happen.
The economic plan that's been put out, a lot of talk has been done on it, and people generally say, at least in the stock market, when you have an incumbent president coming into office in an election year, generally that's good for the market. We've seen economic signs. You know, consumer confidence has been relatively strong, GDP has been strong. The country is statistically in very good shape. Nikki Haley's plan, the Freedom Plan, basically, I'll just take the first part of it. It's killing the gas tax, and she wants to basically control federal spending, which every candidate generally says for the most part. But her cutting the gas tax on the federal side, plus extending some of the tax cuts that already previously were in place, there is a revenue problem with her plan. Do you like her plan?
Well, I can't judge her plan on its merits, but I can judge that this sort of radical proposal or very out of the ballpark kind of proposal is common, especially candidates who are challenging, who need to present something different to voters. That's common, but you have to remember for changes in the tax code, you need Congress, and it's very unlikely that the next president will have the benefit that Trump had in the first half of his term, where he did change the tax code. But and we have to remember that change in the tax code, that lowering of taxes, especially for higher earners, is sunsetting at the end of 2025. So it's unlikely that something that dramatic would pass Congress, and it's more likely that we'll be talking about how the next president is going to deal with the sunset of the Trump tax cuts.
Yeah, so you have the Trump tax cuts. We know what Trump at least has done in the past. Biden, of course, touting his Bidenomics, including that huge, massive gazillion-dollar infrastructure fund that is supposed to generate some hundreds of thousands of jobs and tens of thousands of projects. Many of them are not quite ready, but I believe that some of that money is starting to leak into the system. Is that going to be a big part of what Biden could potentially tout, assuming it's Biden and Trump? He'll talk about Bidenomics and how great it's been.
Well, that's the interesting thing. With inflation coming down, and economists are now agreeing that a soft landing is, if not already here, almost here. The much announced recession did not come. Um, Biden delivered infrastructure week, really infrastructure year, when Trump could not deliver infrastructure week. Again, that was because of his relationship with Congress in the latter part of his term. If the economy continues on the path that it seems to be right now, it's definitely a plus for Biden because inflation is no longer the attack line that it was last year. Republicans talked about Bidenflation and Bidenflation. Well, Bidenflation goes away, and it turns out that Biden's economic policies led to a soft landing and led to growth. It's very hard. It becomes very hard to attack President Biden on his economic record.
Real quick before I let you go, we had Iowa. We're going to have New Hampshire data tonight. Then you have South Carolina and Nevada, and something maybe our viewers aren't familiar with, which is Super Tuesday, which is a lot of states all together. Does Nikki Haley make it there, and what does she need to do to, I guess, be there? And I say that because what numbers does she have to post tonight to give potential voters confidence that she will make it to the finish line?
She needs to be close to Trump, and we're not sure what that means, but within the short double digits, the 10s or 12s, I think that would be a very strong showing. If she makes it out of South Carolina and Nevada with that kind of numbers, then that's where I think people will start being very surprised at her performance. If that happens, again, improbable. Most likely by the time Super Tuesday comes, Trump will all but tied up the nomination and will tie it up in the delegate count in Super Tuesday. But surprises can't happen. I mean, Donald Trump became president in 2016.
Yeah, I was expecting a kind of duke it out primaries, but it may be, well, we'll leave it there. We'll see what happens in the next couple of hours. Rafael Bernal, thank you for joining us and for your insight on this. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure.